announced that he's going to be running for president now that he's won his re-election. So I think, you know, we need to figure out what happened here and do something about it. And I don't think that the way to do that is to put a bunch of so-called centrists, for Joe Biden to put a bunch of so-called centrists in his cabinet. And this is this rush to embrace, you know, banksters and corporate-owned Democrats for his cabinet is something that I think we need to let them know we're not happy with, or we wouldn't be happy with. But as I said, let's wait until the election has been nailed down, step by step. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your calls right after this. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars, if you're back to the water cooler.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So do you think I'm going off the deep end here? Give me a shout. We'll talk about it. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study. Money presumably going into Donald Trump's pockets when there's anything to skim, like he did with the inauguration fund and like he did with his first election fund. And so I clicked on the link. You know, hang on just a second. Let me go back to the email itself. The email is titled "Election Alert." Fred, President Trump is leading, often solidly, in many key states. In almost all instances, Democrat run and controlled. Then, one by one, his lead started to magically disappear as surprise ballot dumps were counted. Very strange, and the pollsters got it completely and historically wrong. It's clear that patriotic Americans want 4 more years of blah-de-blah-de-blah. They will try to steal this election from the American people, plain and simple, blah-de-blah. But we need your help to fight back. So I clicked on it says, you know, please contribute $5 immediately, because that was my donation, $5 back in 2015. So I clicked on that. And I get the donation page. This is winred.com. And at the top it says, Official Election Defense Fund. You know, your contribution, $5. It says, President Trump needs you. Please contribute any amount immediately to the Official Defense Fund, and it'll increase your impact by 1,000%. This is, as well as anybody can tell, just a complete lie, a fabrication. They used to do we'll double, we've got somebody who's going to double it, somebody who's going to triple it. None of that has ever happened, but they continue that. So anyhow, it says your contribution $5, your total impact $55. So you click that, and then below that there's two little yellow boxes, both of which have check marks in them. And the top one says, the Democrats want to steal this election, in all caps, large type. There will be fraud, all caps, large type, like you've never seen. Plain and simple. We need your help, in all caps, to ensure that we have the resources to protect the results and keep fighting even after Election Day. Don't wait. Step up now to defend the integrity of our election. That's all the large type. Below that, little tiny print that's not bold. It's just plain lightweight type, and smaller than the type above it. Make this a weekly recurring donation. Right. And then the one below it does the same thing. It says, donate an additional $5 automatically. But it's below, defend the election, the radical left is going to do whatever it takes to try and rip another Republican a victory. Yeah, this is what's going on. This is definitely what's going on. Tom in Jerusalem, Israel. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing? Hey, I was just wanting to expand on what Isaiah, the gentleman who was talking, I think it was last night, about how white Americans are, so enthralled by Trump, even though he's not giving them anything. And it reminded me of an essay that George Orwell wrote. He reviewed Mein Kampf, and I know you have a very long caller queue, so I'll just summarize it for you. He said it's not just, offering somebody comfort. Hitler said to the nation of Germany, I offer you struggle, danger, and death. As a result, a whole nation flings itself at his feet. And I don't usually like to go down the Hitler rabbit hole, but in this case, I don't know what else to do. I mean, it is truly a cult, and he has opened the door by offering them this. It is a death cult. And I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
No, I don't disagree with you at all, Tom. And Michael Beschloss this morning pointed out, 66 million Americans so far have voted for Donald Trump after watching him for 4 years, after 20,000 lies, after children in cages, after over 20 women charging him with rape or sexual assault, after his charity being shut down as a fraud and a con job, after his university being shut down as a fraud and a con job, after it being revealed that he's $400 million in debt and apparently owes a lot of that money to foreign countries, after it being revealed that he's taking millions of dollars from, for example, Turkey, and then when Erdogan calls him up and says jump, he says how high? Erdogan says stab the Kurds in the back. Trump says fine, they're dead. I mean, for 4 years we've been watching this, and 66 million people are like, yeah, I'm good with this. There's something deeply wrong with the United States, and I think that the principal virus that has infected us is frankly right-wing talk radio. I keep saying, I've been saying this since the early 2000s. When we started this show as an attempt to balance the airwaves. And, we did have a little bit of balance during the Air America time. We're on 54 stations in 54 major cities across the United States. And I believe that Air America went out of business in 2010, but I was on the air on Air America in 2008, and I believe that we helped Barack Obama become president. In fact, I think if Air America had not been on the air, I don't think Barack Obama would have become president. But we were, and he did. And so in 2010, the Democrats, particularly the big funders, the Democracy Alliance, they said, everything's good. We'll see you later, and no more money for Air America. And Air America went bankrupt, to the tune of $14 or $17 million, which, as I keep pointing out, is chump change. They just raised over $1 billion and spent over $1 billion just on the Democratic side in this election. And that's what we know about so far. It's actually probably going to be double that. With $1 billion, you could have bought Clear Channel and you could own 800 radio stations around the country. You could have, it is infuriating. So anyhow, Tom, I'm with you, and I think that just the raw, naked fascism is the direction these guys are going, and it scares the hell out of me. Tom, I got to move along, but thank you for your call. Thanks for listening to us.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for watching us on YouTube there in Jerusalem. Susan in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Susan, what's up?
Oh, I just wanted to share that our voting is going really well here, and the counting as well, and I'd like to explain a little. We have Adrian Fontes, who's a Democrat, and really set up Maricopa County to have an exemplary setup. this is concluded by a guy named John Blakey, who's a big election activist. And what happens is, by October 20th, we are notified right away when they receive our ballot. We're also notified when our signature's been validated, and we're also told when it's about to be counted. On October 20th, they started counting the early voting, and they had that pretty much done by the election. And when the election came in, our first round showed our state was pretty blue, especially Maricopa County. But then they started counting the day, to count the votes of the day, and then, of course, more Republicans voted. Now what's being counted now are 420,000 votes that were early voting on the last few days. It came in the last few days, and also the day of the election. So that's where we are right now. And with
Right, and the day of the election is probably going to be fairly heavy toward Trump, isn't it?
No, we think that Biden will retain it because mail-in votings usually go Democratic, or they are going Democratic this time. So we think we'll keep Biden will win in our state.
Yeah, I hope so. Susan, from your lips to God's ears. Yeah, I really hope so. Susan, thanks. Thanks for the update, and thanks for the ray of hope. It's great to hear from you. Reginald in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hey, Reginald, what's up?
Yeah, how you doing? I heard you talking about Admiral. That made me think. I work with the railroad, and the only station I can pick you up there when I was heading back to work was through Memphis. I used to listen to you every Sunday riding through Memphis when you was with Admiral.
Okay.
But what I call about with McConnell telling Biden about what type of people to pick for his cabinet. Well, first thing first, Biden should tell him he's not the president, I am. And number two,
right.
Biden need to take a page out of Trump playbook. If Mitch don't want to pass none of his cabinet appointment, he should make all of them active.
I agree. Acting appointees. I am with you, and he doesn't need McConnell. He doesn't need McConnell to get people through the courts either. Excellent point, Reginald. Thank you. Jacqueline in Northridge, California. Hey, Jacqueline, what's up?
Hi there. Back to evil right-wing radio. Okay, I'm here in the Los Angeles area. There's an expat Iranians here. My best friend, been here for 25 years. She can vote. So can most of her friends. There is a very large right-wing radio station that she listens to, and she's a very smart woman, and she's, like I said, she's been here for years, but she came over last night and said, have you heard that the Republicans are being given Sharpies at polling stations so their votes aren't counting? And I said, that's ridiculous. And she listens to this right-wing Farsi radio station. All of her Persian friends do as well, and they come out with these talking points time after time. She was listening in the car on the radio on her way back from work, and she believed it.
And they're doing that in Spanish language radio too. And this is the conspiracy theory that Don Jr. and Eric have been promoting, that that they're giving Republicans Sharpies to vote, and it's just not true. But in Arizona, the Secretary of State said if they used Sharpies, they would be read. They would be read also. I mean, it's crazy. Jacqueline, I got to run, but thank you. Thanks for the report. I didn't realize that Farsi radio was a thing in California. It's not surprising, but thank you. Thanks for the heads up. The right wing, these right wing billionaires have been extending their fingers into every little aspect of America.
You're
it's
listening
amazing.
to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. 45 minutes past the hour at the Thom Hartmann Program, where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say, no, not a chance. And welcome back. Let's see here. Charlotte in Ramona, California. Hey, Charlotte, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
I was wondering whether or not you'd had a chance to read an editorial in the New York Times this morning by Charles Blow. He was talking about how this time around more people that are LGBTQ and more black participants have voted for Trump than last time around. And I'm wondering why you think that is.
Yeah, well, there has been an effort, a fairly substantial effort actually, by the Republican Party and by, in particular, some of the dark money donors associated with the Republican Party, to do outreach to black men, and in particular, specifically, and to Hispanic men. And they're using Spanish language radio for the Hispanic men, and they're using a variety of methods, principally Facebook, for black men. And the message the messages vary depending on the market, but what would be interesting is if anybody who is listening to me has had an opportunity to listen to local right-wing radio and let us know what they're hearing, whether it's, particularly if you speak Spanish language radio, or if you're listening to radio shows that have large black audiences, that are not progressive shows, to let us know, or what you're seeing on Facebook. But this is the result of a very serious outreach effort that they've been doing for some time, Charlotte. And it's not going to go away. It's going to get bigger and bigger, and particularly among Hispanics, but it's also large in the African American community. Charlotte, thanks for the call. John in Los Angeles. Hey, John, what's up?
Tom, I think you are getting better. You're not going off the deep end, okay? When you talk tough or controversial or confrontational, and that is a good thing, because to do otherwise and be nice and kind and sweet like Gore or Biden would want us to be is just to give tacit approval for the kind of nonsense, I'm saying that sweetly and nicely, that's going on right now in this country.
Yeah,
thank you.
The malarkey. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the reality check. I appreciate it. Andrew in Riverside, California. Hey, Andrew, what's up?
Yeah, hey, Tom. It seems like the right-wing cult phenomenon is caused by a lack of critical thinking on the behalf of many Americans. And I'm wondering if you agree with that, what's causing that, and how we can offset that. And it seems like, I don't listen to right-wing talk radio. I'm wondering if the format is like your show, because it seems like having callers call in really contributes to critical thinking. We have lots of different ideas being exchanged, and you giving your intelligent view on these ideas that come through, and we get that on Pacifica Radio, KPFK, KPFA, and I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that, that there's been a loss of critical thinking in our education systems across the country, and B, that when you are deeply in a cult, even the smartest person, even the person who has great critical thinking skills, if they have bought into a cult, they are, at least over the short term, lost. And that's what's happened. These guys are using cult, the Republicans and the conservatives are using cult strategies to bring people into their cult. We'll be right back. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. Our video for our supporters available over at thomhartmann.com talks about the radical idea of universal health care. What countries in the world might actually have universal health care? Something that, according to Republicans, we're just not smart enough or competent enough or whatever. It's Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Israel, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Portugal, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. So why can't we do it here? Well, because you've got an entire political party, the Republican Party, and a few Democrats who are wholly owned subsidiaries of the health insurance industry, and you got a health insurance industry that's paying its CEOs millions, in one case, United Healthcare, billions, or billion, And so good luck. Anyhow, it's over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Steve in Brighton, New York. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Well, Tom, I'd like to maybe educate you a little bit about a fact. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and I think it was the same at the Pete Dog in Washington. They did a survey after the Bush thing with Gore and all that stuff, and they did a survey after it and counted the votes in Florida for every county, and they found out that Bush won the state. Now, you never saw that. It was never published.
Hang on just a second. Did you say Bush won the state or lost the state?
No, Bush won it by counting all the votes.
No, we've talked about this on this program a number of times. I've written about it in several places. If you go back and read that New York Times article that was published a year after the election, it was published in November. In fact, I think it was November 17th. I might be wrong, but it was published in November of 2001, and it was after 9/11. It was just a month after 9/11, and that article has the headline. The headline says that Gore's strategy would have failed in Florida. Which was true. Gore's strategy, let me finish, Steve, hold on. Gore's strategy was to sue to have a recount in 3 counties, Miami-Dade and 2 others, I forget what they were, but it was the 3 right around Miami. And the recount showed that would not have gotten Gore enough votes to win. But if you go down to I know where I'm getting the number 17 from. If you go down to the 17th paragraph in that article, it says, however, Al Gore won by any measure, right? If intent of voter, overvotes, undervotes, any measure, Al Gore won the election. But they buried that lead. When Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, was asked about that about a month later, or actually it was several months later, why did you bury the lead on that story? Why did you put a headline that suggested that Bush actually legitimately won Florida when in fact Al Gore, the recount showed that Al Gore would have won Florida? And he said because 9/11 just had happened and we did not want to diminish the stature or legitimacy. Legitimacy was the word he used. The legitimacy of the presidency of George W. Bush.
Tom, that's a lot of bull.
Yeah, well, Steve, I'm sorry. Just go read the New York Times article. You can call me back and quote to me from it if you'd like. David in Columbus, Ohio, and it wasn't just the New York Times, by the way. David in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Hi, how you doing? I was a Lesser Judge in Franklin County in a small precinct, and I think we need to simplify our elections a little bit. Our computers went down for verifying who was and was not registered, and we did it by paper, and it worked fine. We had a lot of people backed up, but I think we got through them pretty quickly. And I think you're absolutely right about putting pressure on Biden, because the only problem is that we've got no leverage now that he's in. I mean, what can we do to get him to do what we want? I guess we have to talk to our local officials and our elected.
Speak out loudly. Well, first of all, let's wait until he's actually been, declared president. I'm jumping the gun here a little bit. But, once that happens, the vast majority of Americans are totally in favor of the progressive set of goals. The Fox poll last week, 71% of Americans want a national health care program. The vast majority of Americans want green jobs. They want something, if you don't call it the Green New Deal, but you describe it, the vast majority of Americans want it. The vast majority of Americans think student debt shouldn't be a thing in the United States. And by the way, it wasn't 30 years ago. The vast majority of Americans are fully supportive of the progressive agenda. They think Social Security should be strengthened. They think the taxes on the rich should be increased. They think corporations should start paying taxes. The vast majority of Americans support these positions. But obviously Republicans don't. And
I support all these positions. I think they're important. I think the Democrats need to run on this stuff. They weren't putting anything in their literature when they asked for money. Say someone was running for senator, they would just say how bad Trump was. And I don't care how bad Trump is. I know how bad he is. I want to know what they're going to do.
Yeah, Americans want something to vote for. And that's why, the squad was all reelected overwhelmingly, for example. That's why progressives tend to do really well in elections. And so-called moderate Democrats, not so much. I mean, yes, it depends on the district, and there may be some districts where the occasional moderate Democrat actually has the support of a lot of Republican voters. But really, if you really want to fight this, you need to be Lyndon Johnson or Franklin Roosevelt. You need to be a real progressive. Being a milquetoast Democrat just doesn't work. And,
I know.
Yeah, David, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be back. We'll continue this conversation. By the way, we've got a bunch of stuff coming up in the program today. Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, will be with us next. And in our third hour, Greg Palast is going to drop by. We're going to be talking about, the theft of the election. And Dr. Justin Frank about Donald Trump's lawsuits. What does that reveal about him? He's the psychiatrist.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. More info at teethhealth.com, code TOM. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at /Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM.
For our book club today, we're reading from Thomas Frank's book, Rendezvous with Oblivion, Reports from a Sinking Society. This is chapter 1, titled Servile Disobedience. Social scientists have tried for more than a century to understand how class works. Psychological experiments on the subject, however, are a relatively novel thing, so I was surprised to discover a few years ago that psychologists had published a series of papers on the behavioral aspects of social status, and that their findings were almost uniformly unflattering towards society's winners. In one 2009 study in Psychological Science found that in conversations with strangers, high-status people tend to do more doodling and fidgeting, and also to use fewer engagement cues, looking at the other person, laughing, nodding their heads. A 2010 paper published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that lower-class individuals, in quote, turned out to be better performers on measures of such pro-social virtues as generosity, charity, and helpfulness. A third study found that those of higher status were noticeably worse at assessing the emotions of others or figuring out what facial expressions mean. All of which is to say the rich are different from you and me. They are more rude and less generous. They don't understand, they don't get what others are thinking, and apparently they don't really care. Perhaps this is obvious to you. After all, people don't design toxic debt obligations by calling on what they learned in Sunday school. Still, the research aroused media interest. The Christian Science Monitor's 2010 account of one study ended with this quotation from Michael Krauss, then the University of California, San Francisco, who was one of the researchers, quote, "Being empathic is one of the first steps to helping other people. One of the first things we're really interested in is what can make wealthy people, affluent people, the people with the capacity to give, what can make them empathic?" I think I see the urgency of Dr. Krauss's question. After all, we have spent the past several decades doing everything we could to transfer the wealth of the nation into the bank accounts of the affluent to send them victorious, happy, and glorious, long to reign over us. Oh, we've cut their taxes, gladly transferring much of the cost of keeping their property safe onto our own shoulders. We've furnished them with special megaphones so that their voices can be heard over the hubbub of the crowd. We've conferred upon them separate and better schools, their very own transportation system, and a full complement of private security guards. We've built an entire culture of courtiers and sycophants to make their every working hour an otherworldly delight. We let them construct a system of bonuses and executive compensation on the theory that it would be good for everyone if the people at the top got to take home much, much more than the rest of us. And when it turned out that the theory was wrong, that in the most famous cases, executives chased bonuses not to the shareholders' benefit, but at their expense, why, we promptly bailed them out. We allowed them to step into the best discount window and fill their pockets. We generously transferred their reckless investments to our balance sheet, and we chastised them a little more than with little polite requests that they please not do it again. We've done everything we can to lift them up and exalt them as the new Leviathan. The least they can do in return, one feels, is to show a little empathy. Besides, look what we've done with the old Leviathan, the government. For decades, we've attacked it, redirected it, outsourced it, and filled it with incompetence and cronies. Yes, it still works well enough when we need to blow up some small country, but those branches of it designed to help our Americans of lower socioeconomic status, in quotes, as the scientists would put it, are now bare. We need the rich to be nice. We need them to stop doodling, paying and to pay attention and get generous. Now that the government has divested from the empathy business, we need the rich to discover brotherly love and fast. Come to think of it, wasn't that supposed to be the deal in the first place? The Iranian Andrew Carnegie brokered over a century ago when he made his big career move from Steel King to public library baron. The laissez-faire social contract would grant private business a free hand, but in exchange, those who piled up massive wealth were supposed to extend a magnanimous hand to the rest of us. As Carnegie wrote in his famous 1889 essay, The Gospel of Wealth, we don't need socialism to solve our problems. Philanthropy is the true antidote for the temporary inequality distribution of wealth and reconciliation of the rich and poor, quoting Carnegie. Going further, Carnegie argued that the duty of the man of wealth was, quote, to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he's called upon to administer in the manner which, in his judgment, is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results for the community. The man of wealth thus becoming the mere trustee and agent for his poorer brethren, end quote. That same way of thinking led Carnegie to support the estate tax. Of all forms of taxation, this seems the wisest, he wrote. It was wise because it would, quote, induce the rich man to attend to the administration of wealth during his life. And if he didn't, then the tax would return most of his hoardings to the community from which it came, using Carnegie's words. Vestiges of the Carnegie attitude survive to this day. 2009 study of high net worth individuals by Barclays Wealth confirmed that American philanthropists tend to understand their giving in a context in which the state is either absent or irrelevant. And of course, there are plenty of nice plutocrats who don't fidget or doodle when talking to strangers and who have no problem endowing a ward or a wing in return for a commemorative plaque. The business headlines even occasionally tell of billionaires coming together under the leadership of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates to donate their fortunes to worthy causes. But the billionaires with the strongest sense of class solidarity have a very different plan for their disposable income, activating their lobbyists in Washington, building grassroots movements to march on their behalf, and using their media properties to run experiments on human credulity. Rendezvous with Oblivion is the
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. On the line with us is Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of Democracy at Work, author of numerous books. His latest, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. democracyatwork.info and rdwolf with 2fs.com. His website's Prof. Wolff. His Twitter handle, PROFWOLFF. Professor Wolff, welcome back. There was a big ballot measure in California that passed that the gig economy companies, principally Uber and Lyft, had put apparently over $100 million into promoting. The opposition was able to raise a couple $1 million, the unions, I think maybe $20 million to fight it, but they were up against a huge pile of cash. Can you tell us about what that ballot measure was and why it's of consequence to every working person in America?
Yes, I'd be glad to, and I'm grateful that you are giving it this kind of attention, Tom. It really deserves it. The way to understand it, again, is as always historically. You know, we live in a country where over the last 150 to 200 years, all kinds of men and women have struggled in every part of this country to develop what we generally call labor protection legislation. Rules that say an employer has to pay a worker when the worker works, that you can't abuse working people, that you can't demand that they work overtime without compensating them extra for it, that you can't sexually harass them, and on and on and on and on. All of those laws that were fought for at a time when everyone generally understood you divided the people in the economic sphere into the employer, a small number of people, and the employees, the vast rest of us. And so there were these built-up protections. What the election accomplished, led by Uber and Lyft, as you quite rightly say, but other companies were involved here too, was an attempt to avoid workers who have these built-up legislated protections. By calling a worker not a worker, not an employee, the legislation doesn't cover them. By calling them instead an independent contractor, hence the phrase gig economy, the idea being you're like a person who signs up to do a gig, gets paid for the service, but you're not in the employ of whoever you contract with. This legalistic differentiation is worth the roughly $200 million, which is what I've seen as the number, that Uber, Lyft, and the other companies poured into this. And I think the important economics here is that the enormous profits Uber and Lyft make are largely the consequence that they don't have the costs that would be involved if you had to protect workers in the ways that, as I said, 200 years of labor legislation built up. So what this means is now every other state, because this was just an election in California where this was decided, all the other 49 states are now going to be targets to go through the same procedure. And all other service industries are going to be given an enormous incentive to try to get laws passed in the same way, spending the same bundles of money, basically to deprive the American working class, or at least a large portion of it that works in services, of the protections that their parents and grandparents fought so hard for. It is a very bad sign of a downward direction of the standard of living of American workers, because they're not going to be protected, they're not going to be safeguarded in the ways that they knew they had to, which is why those battles were fought in the past.
So these protections for for workers that have been put into law over the last couple hundred years in the United States, step by painful step, in some cases lawsuit by painful lawsuit, in most cases legislation, that these guys want to do away with. These have been being systematically eroded step by step. I mean, this is the final process. I would argue, well, not necessarily final, but this is the most recent process that really started in 1980 with the Reagan administration and the adoption of neoliberalism as the official economic and political strategy of the United States. And, you know, and was maintained during the Clinton and Bush and Obama administrations and Trump administrations as well. and was amplified by a whole series of Supreme Court decisions that also struck down workers' rights. And the thing that baffles me about all of this, Professor Richard Wolff, is that roughly half of the American electorate not only think that's fine, they celebrate it. Now, I realize that that worldview has been promoted relentlessly on right-wing talk radio that reaches tens of millions of Americans every single day all across the United States for 40 years now. And you know, that's part of the problem. But why do you think that is? How is it that the majority of America, or not the majority, but you know, about half of the American workforce who are voting are saying, yeah, take away our protections. We want to go with the Republicans.
Well, you know, the Republicans learned and the conservatives learned in the bitter experience, bitter for them, of what happened in the 1930s and 40s and 50s when you had a mobilized labor movement, when you had a mobilized left wing in America. They learned what that could achieve. Social Security, unemployment compensation, minimum wage, government jobs, anti-discrimination laws, all kinds of things could be accomplished if the working class was mobilized, and they could make the employers and the rich people pay at least a significant portion of this. And the reaction, we're living through, it's our lifetimes, Tom, yours and mine, living through the rolling back of that New Deal, the rolling back of all of that. And in the process, the conservatives and Republicans learned you can't face the issue on the surface. If you put it up to people, look, do you want to help other working people? You know, they still vote for it. Florida voted to raise the minimum wage. Portland, Maine voted to institute rent control and time and a half for work during a pandemic. Wonderful progressive things put on the ballot, won despite overwhelming money spent. That clearly, you still get the majority of Americans. But that's not what the Republicans do. They talk about freedom. They demonize unions. They tell stories about that are written by the PR departments of Uber and Lyft in the main about how this will be a wonderful benefit for poor people. They've learned you have to tell a story. And the ultimate storyteller, who literally makes it up as he goes along, is Mr. Trump, who is, in a sense, the final form of this fantasy of a different way of looking at the world to get the people to vote in the way you rightly are upset about.
So when Democratic administrations come along, we had Clinton, we had Obama, that were ambivalent about this. The Obama administration actually was trying, their Labor Department was trying to force Uber and Lyft to deal with these folks as employees. But, you know, it wasn't at the top of their list. But, you know, they made an effort. But should, for example, the Biden administration go soft on this, how should the American people respond?
They should respond the way they should have with Obama. I mean, the Democratic Party is caught in an unbelievable contradiction that they don't want to talk about. On the one hand, you go hand in hand to corporations and the rich asking for donations. If you're doing that, then how are you going to mobilize the working class, which is the adversary of those corporations and is the victim of those corporate dealings? You can't champion the working class if you're going with your hat in hand to the employers of that working class. The Republicans don't have that problem. They go get the donations, and they don't want to champion the working class. On the contrary, they champion repression of the working class. So they don't have a contradiction comparable to the one that the Democrats do. I think that's the core issue.
Yeah, I think you're right. Professor Richard Wolff, thank you so much, Dr. Wolff. It's great having you on.
Thank you, Tom.
Check out his website, democracyatwork.info, rdwolf with 2fs.com. You can tweet him at Prof. Wolf. And his new book, The System is the Sickness, is really worth checking out. We'll be right back 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Stick around. And new tallies expected. Biden gains ground in Georgia and Nevada. Right now, we're at 88% of the vote is in Nevada, and Biden is 49.4 to Trump's 48.5. In Georgia, 98% of the vote is in, and it is Trump over Biden, 49.5 to 49.2, which means that the third-party votes are affecting that. In North Carolina, Trump is 2 points ahead. They haven't called that yet, but I think it's going to go for Trump. And in Pennsylvania, Trump is ahead by 1.5 points, 1.8 actually, 50.3 to 48.5, but only 92% of the votes have been counted. So, you know, step by step. Alaska's looking like it's solidly going for Trump. So we'll see how this thing shakes out. Let's see here. Pauline in Los Angeles. Hey, Pauline, what's on your mind today?
Hi there, Tom. Well, I just want to say I definitely agree with you about the left or progressives needing the equivalent of right-wing radio across the nation. But to achieve that, I guess I kind of disagree a little bit with Wolff, that I think right now, with the results of this election, even if Biden wins, we are going to have to work very hard just to hold the line throughout the rest of his first term. And, you know, the Republicans are set to have still a lot more victories in, you know, the next time around. So it's, I think that we have to use a lot of the tools that we're going to have that are available to us, that are still available to us, and that the Republicans obviously use. And that means we are going to have to seek out money and seek out donors heavily, and start using PACs and start using some dark money to fund, you know, this idea, let's say, of getting some left-wing radio out there, how to get that funded. You know, we're going to have to rely on the same things that the Republicans rely on to accomplish these things, because right now things are going to be really bad and Biden's going to be struggling a lot.
It's a business opportunity for left-wing entrepreneurs, Pauline. You know, I'm making a living doing this radio show. It's not. This isn't rocket science. If you know, some progressive company, you know, progressive business owners.
You're already established though, and right now we have this terrible economy now. A lot of people are going to be suffering. So I think that to offset it, not that I'm saying that we should just go and be back what we were doing and rely on, you know, just corporate Democrats. I'm not saying that we should just go to that. I'm just saying that we have to be savvy and also be able to use some of the tools that are going to help us hold the line. Because I think that's more.
I think one of the things that we need to look at, Pauline, is how much of all of this flood of money that came into Democratic candidates came from individual donors, corporations, or fat cats. And I'm guessing that it's going to be really high individual donors.
That still needs to
expand. It needs to expand, but it's not just about the money, it's about the message. You know, Democrats spent $1 billion basically saying Donald Trump is evil, rather than saying we are going to do the Green New Deal and we are going to give everybody Medicare. I mean, you know, I think that had Democrats run on an actual progressive message, this would have been a blowout. Now, I realize that the corporate Democrats will tell you that I am naive. I don't think I am. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past 3. On the Science Revolution this week, how a Green New Deal could save hundreds of thousands of lives. Also, Dr. Justin Frank submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court on Bush v. Gore and is talking about psychoanalytic and family dynamic perspective in that context. I weigh in on how the GOP is an organized gang of sociopaths. Meet the 14-year-old climate activist, Haven Coleman. She'll be discussing how youth climate activists are leading the push for climate action in the Democratic Party and why they believe voting for climate in 2020 is so critical. And in Geeky Science, why health care for all is a climate solution. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, in my business, the radio business, we just lost somebody. Most of my listeners probably are not familiar with religious broadcasting across the United States, but it's actually as big as, and maybe bigger. I haven't seen numbers in a long time, but in any case, nearly as big as right-wing talk radio across America. And Irwin Baxter was the host of a program that he started back in 1991 through his ministry, End Time Ministries. It was called Politics and Religion, and it was on National Prophecy Radio, syndicated across the United States. He was most recently praising Donald Trump for moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem because that would bring about the rapture. That would bring about the biblical apocalypse and the end times. He also said that the coronavirus is the result of people having premarital sex, and he kind of endorsed Donald Trump's theory that we should just let it run through the population, no big deal. Irwin Baxter just died of COVID. His ministry announced with deep grief that the pastor had died yesterday, or day before yesterday, on Tuesday. Yeah, it happens, right? It happens. Every now and then you come up against reality. There's also the United States Postal Service is being asked by the by a federal D.C. court to expedite the remaining mail-in ballots to election boards in North Carolina and Pennsylvania. They can be received up until today to be counted over the next day or two. We'll see how this comes out. Apparently 150,000 ballots were delivered yesterday by the Postal Service. A lot of these in Atlanta. So, how this shakes out. These are all obviously people who postmarked their ballots before Election Day. And then, the post office, because Louis DeJoy slowed down the mail so badly in a lot of these, weirdly, swing states took the biggest hits. I'm guessing those are the places where most of the high-speed sorting machines were dismantled, although we don't have a complete list because the post office has not been even remotely transparent with us about what this, about any of this. So we'll see where this goes. Mitch McConnell, by the way, is also saying that he may not allow any nominations, or implying that he may not allow any federal judge nominations for Joe Biden if Joe Biden wins the election. He's going to do the same thing he did to Obama. The last 2 years, the Obama administration, I think they allowed one judge on the bench. So that when Trump came into office, there was, just a little short of 200 vacancies on the federal bench. And that were supposed to be Obama judges, not to mention Merrick Garland. I mean, Merrick Garland was simply the extension of a process that Mitch McConnell had started a whole year earlier, and that now he's saying he's going to reprise. I think that Joe Biden should nominate the most progressive judges he can find. And then when Mitch McConnell refuses to hold hearings in the Senate, he should notify Mitch McConnell that it's apparent that the Senate, people are pushing Obama to do this, by the way. Notify Mitch McConnell that, apparently the Senate is abrogating its right to advise and consent, to advise the president on judicial nominations and offer their consent. And so we are going to assume, since you're refusing to do this, that you are consenting to these people, and we're going to go ahead and install them on the federal bench and swear them in. Will Biden play hardball? We'll see. We'll see. Meanwhile, U.S. election law says that federal armed officials, it bars the stationing of armed officials, quote, at any place where a general or special election is held. And now one of the principal associate deputy attorney general, Richard Donahue, is saying, no, we can put armed agents in these places where the votes are being counted. Some people, particularly civil rights lawyers, are saying this is an effort to intimidate people. The vote counting process is one that's just very straightforward. It's nonpartisan. These are people who have volunteered for the good of their community. They're not there to be Democrats or Republicans, and it just needs to be allowed. A Florida poll worker has come out and pointed out. By the way, before I get to that, Scott Walker, former right-wing cokehead governor of Wisconsin. Trump is suing for a recount in Wisconsin, because Biden won Wisconsin by tens of thousands of votes. So Scott Walker says 20,000 is a high hurdle. Right now, Biden's ahead by about 20,000 votes. He says after the recount in the 2011 race for the Wisconsin Supreme Court, there was a swing of 300 votes. After the recount in the 2016 presidential race in Wisconsin, the count went up by 131 votes. So, you know, they're pretty accurate in counting their votes. They're doing a very, very good job of that. So meanwhile, this poll worker down in Florida says, quote, Trump's faithful followers, this is from a diary over on Daily Kos. Florida poll worker details the physical and verbal abuse he experienced from Trump cult members. Trump's faithful followers blocked access in and out of our polling place with vehicles, interfered with traffic by standing in the streets and waving flags, and directly interfered with voters in the precinct by blasting train horns from jacked up trucks parked in the polling place where voters were trying to vote. A man decorated head to toe with cheap Trump memorabilia poked me repeatedly in the chest, Kasky recalls. Others threatened and harassed a group of teenage girls who arrived on Election Day to peacefully and quietly sit behind a Students Demand Action on Climate Change banner. These guys are bullies. They're punks. We'll be back with more of your thoughts, your calls on this. I think you know pretty much where I stand on where we're at, where we're going, and what we need to be doing. Stick around. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. No news on the election front, by the way. I'll keep you up to date.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Talk media for the sane among us. Yeah, there's still some of us left. Amazing, isn't it? Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They're different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different, inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer healthcare, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide healthcare to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single-payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust. Yeah.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. For our video this week for supporters of our program, you can find it over at thomhartmann.com. We're talking about endocrine disruptors as modulators of obesity. And this is in fact, the title of the article in Cell Endocrinology was Endocrine Disruptors as Obesogens. Why is it that almost a third of Americans are obese? And that's not true of, say, Italians. And it turns out there's actually a single measurable, definable variable. There's a category, or actually several broad categories of chemicals that are found in the American food supply in particular places, and therefore fairly easy to avoid, that actually disrupt our endocrine system, our hormone system, and cause us to crave more food, to eat more food, and also downregulate our metabolism so that we burn less energy so that food gets stored as fat. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Mark in Detroit. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I want to tell you, yesterday I went out and voted, and guess what? I did use markers. And I wanted to let it be known that when here in Detroit, when the population is predominantly black, where I live in Warren County, I'm so proud of it, and all we have to do is vote. other cities, other counties continue to finish counting, and it's a Biden game. We didn't get mad about 3 years ago when Trump snuck in there through all the radical and prejudiced attempts he used. So let it ride. It's our turn. Let the Biden get in there, do his job, and hope the Congress and the city will work with it.
Yeah. Step one, right? Step one. Thank you, Mark. Ray in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Hey, Ray, what's up?
Hey, hi, Tom. I just wonder, when Biden becomes president, can he put a new attorney general in, and can they take the redacted part of the Mueller investigation and make it public?
Yes, they can do all of that, and Bill Barr will be out on his keister, and thank God. And he can put a decent person in his AG. There is no shortage of them. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, will they be able to go after Barr for anything? Because he's been in this crap for like 40, 50 years. I mean, he's
I doubt that they will go. Yeah, I doubt that they'll go after Barr. I think that it's an open question whether they'll go after Trump. Given all the state level investigations, but just replacing him, I think, is a really, really good starting point. Ray, thanks a lot for the call. Tim in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing? Listen, a couple things. First of all, I am in the same district that the Madison Coffin won. I'm the guy that raises the possums, and I've been a wildlife artist. I've also been a martial artist. Madison and I go way back, okay? I was in the dojo training him in karate way back when. I guarantee you, in 4 years, I will run against him and I will beat him, okay? I will take back that house seat. But why I call basically is we need to implode the DNA of the DNC. And having been an artist and been in marketing for, nearly 40 years, it was Andrew Jackson, who was the great Indian killer, that we get the icon of the jackass, the donkey, from. And he used that. We need to take and get rid of the imagery, and let's adopt a symbol like the American eagle. Can you imagine what the conservatives would do if the Democrats had the symbol of the American eagle, or the bald eagle, or a great big emboldened, powerful-looking bird symbol? I mean, what would they do? Take a bear over their... visualization right now is everything. Imagery is everything in marketing. And if we get rid of the donkey, which has been caricaturized to death, satirized to death, and re-establish the DNC as something a lot more tangible and a lot more serious, I think we're going to do a lot better. We also, and to get rid of the two-party system, we're always going to have a divided country. We're either ones or zeros. It's binary. It's us or them. There's no other
There is a way to solve that problem, Tim, and that's with instant runoff voting, which Maine has put into place, and I think is one of the reasons why Susan Collins can win the vote and Donald Trump can lose. Instant runoff voting is a really important innovation that Australia and New Zealand adopted. They had a political system very similar to ours that produced a two-party outcome. You'll still tend to have a couple of dominant parties, but we're not going to flip into a parliamentary system. But I think that's a good. Your point is excellent, and those are directions we really need to think about looking at. Thank you very much for the call, John and Eugene. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, Tom, first of all, I wanted to thank you for the great books you wrote on ADHD. And that helped our family tremendously with one of our kids who was going through that. And very informative books, and well written too. Just listening to you today and reflecting on this election, it seems to me, first of all, the polling is cannot be achieved in this age, because when you think about it, the essence of voting is that it's a private vote. It's a private statement. And, these pollsters calling people up and saying, hey, Mr. Smith on Oak Street, we've got your name and your phone number here. Who are you going to vote for? The upstanding guy without the criminal record, or the guy who's a criminal and a racist?
and people just don't answer that question. I think so. I think that's the flaw in polling when you have people like Trump and his ilk running. But getting back to your comment on Air America, which was a great station, we listened to it, and what the Dems sorely need when you look at how much wasted money went to some of these races where they really didn't have a chance, apparently, of winning. You look at all the funds that went that way. What the Dems really need is a media outlet. They need a TV network and, of course, a radio show. I'm watching you on Free Speech TV. It's a good format. Some of the other shows really need the Progressive Caucus in the House and the Senate. The progressives in the Senate need to go to their leadership and say, "Listen, we want to fund the Democratic Media Fund, and we need a media outlet like our opposition has, because how in the world does it get 48% of the population after his performance?"
He gets there with 1,500 radio stations and Fox News.
Right.
And a massive operation on Facebook.
Exactly, and that's what the Dems should be funding instead of funding,
instead of buying ads on TV networks. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm totally with you. I am totally with you. John, I've got to move on, but you made your point. You made it very well. Thank you, John. From John to John. John in Seattle. Hey, John, what's up?
Oh, thanks again, Tom. Just briefly riffing on both progressive radio and the water cooler on the election, I would suggest that your listeners and viewers go to the first session of Democracy Now!, the show that ran today. Juan Gonzalez has this analysis that says, no, the corporate media has it wrong once again, that record turnout from people of color who knew they had lots to lose, that helped Biden. And what actually helped Trump was that white voters either sat on their hands again, maybe lulled into sleep by the polls, and but the percentage of white voters went a little more to Trump than it did in 2016. And if my suggestion for the Democratic Party is, you've got to really build the big tent. Don't recognize.
This is not about the Democratic Party, John.
Huh?
This is not about the Democratic Party. This is about the Republican Party openly promoting on right-wing talk radio and on Fox News the idea that you've got black people out of control across the country, burning down cities, and the mobs not jobs was the slogan of the Trump ads, if you saw them on TV. This is about a massive structure in the United States being mobilized on Trump's behalf to make white people afraid of black people. And there's nothing the Democratic Party can do to change that other than put out an opposite message, a clear opposite message that black people are decent people just like white people are, and yes, there's a few bad apples in every race and every group, and et cetera. And let's move forward. And the Democratic Party and progressive media need to be talking about things like good jobs, decarbonizing our environment, strengthening Social Security, good pay for people.
That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah. Okay. Good. John, thanks a lot for the call. I mean, this is. It's what a day. What a day. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll continue the conversation after this. And Greg Palast and Dr. Justin Frank will be with us in the third hour of our program. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Helping you win the water cooler wars on the Not an Option, the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. Let's see here. Nancy in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to say that I'm from Tucson, which is in southern Arizona, and we are the Democratic stronghold. We've tried to secede from the rest of Arizona, but haven't been successful. And we never get any media what's going on in Arizona. It's always just like super conservative, and it's not. But that's not what I wanted to talk
It's
about.
a college
What I wanted
town,
to Well, and not only that, but there's an air base here. There's all sorts of research at the University of Arizona. But anyway, that isn't really what I wanted to talk about. It was about democratic messaging, which you've talked about somewhat today. And I just thought, for instance, having Putin and Trump standing next to each other, maybe a 10-second TV ad, and say, "I'm American." I just don't know why that wasn't pushed. Or, the Erdogan going after the Kurds after Donald Trump did a victory lap of, look, we, beat ISIS in Syria. Jared Kushner getting a $100 billion loan from China, un-American. I just don't know. I think democratic messaging, it's just not as good. Where Republicans, for instance, kept saying socialism, socialism, socialism. And in advertising, as you know, you keep repeating, and Democrats don't do that.
Yeah. To the advice that Hitler's propaganda, it was Joseph Goebbels, that Goebbels gave, which is boil your message down to three things and repeat them relentlessly. And if you're going to lie, make it a big lie. And the Republican Party has relentlessly gone with this for years. And the Democratic Party has been scattered all over the place in terms of messaging and has had a really good high-level commitment to never telling lies, which, is not, I'm not saying it's not working out for them, but they need to be pushing back against the lies Republicans are telling. We've got one party who has committed itself, the Republican Party has committed itself to spreading falsehoods, spreading fear, spreading hate, and suppressing votes. And then you've got the Democratic Party that has committed itself to working on behalf of worker protections, environmental protections, giving everybody the right to participate in our elections, and telling the truth. And that contrast is not well known to most Americans. 66 million Americans went out today and said, yeah, we're going to vote for the liar. We're going to vote for the party that wants to destroy our Social Security, and medically don't know the agenda of the Republican Party. And it's on the Democrats to inform them and to use all the vehicles available to them to inform them. And that includes radio, television, and Facebook in a big way. Facebook has become the modern day battleground. This is where the 2016 election was decided, on Facebook. With a little help from Russians and probably Iranians and South Koreans and North Koreans and God only knows who else. But Democrats need to be fighting. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. You can help America return to democracy by telling friends and family how to listen to this and other great progressive programs. Tag You're It. So we just put up a new member-only video talking about Donald Trump being a racist and how we're all dancing around there, or at least the media. By we, I'm talking about the media that I'm a part of, I suppose. The media broadly is and for that matter in Congress. I mean, with this House resolution to condemn Trump's racist tweets, they couldn't condemn Trump as a racist. That would have been a violation of House rules. But his tweets, we'll condemn them, right? This is the same guy who said, and I quote, laziness is a trait in blacks, end quote. He said, quote, immigrants from Haiti all have AIDS, end quote. He said, if Nigerian immigrants came here, they would, quote, never go back to their huts, end quote. He referred to S-hole countries. He lied about Obama repeatedly. I mean, Anyhow, let's just call out his racism. All the examples are in the video, and I think you'll find it fascinating. It's available over at thomhartmann.com, so check it out. Thank you. Oh, welcome back. Karen in Waynesville, North Carolina. Hey, Karen, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I have a quick question, but I want to comment on your previous caller from Hendersonville that's going to run in the 11th district next time against Madison Cawthorn, and please beat him. He's everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie so far that I've heard, and I'm in that district. But anyway, to my question, if the Senate ends up in a 50-50 tie, how are the committee chairs, and what's the structure when it's a 50-50 tie?
That's a really good question. I do not know the answer to it, Karen. I'm sorry.
Because it's
I'm not
sure
a
it's possibility.
Ever happened. Yeah, it is a possibility. There's an even number of senators. It's entirely a possibility. Yeah. I'm guessing that because the tie-breaking vote is the vice president, which in this case would be Kamala Harris, assuming that Biden wins, that means that the Senate is considered to be a Democratic majority, and that would put Chuck Schumer or whoever the Democrats elect as their majority leader into that seat. But we're going to have to pick up a couple of seats here. Ideally, 2 of them in Georgia. That would do it.
Yeah.
But it's going to take some more.
The ABC affiliate in Asheville, WLOS, says that Tom Tillis congratulated himself on the victory too early, and that is not totally decided yet. There's too many outstanding votes. So there is a slight possibility that Cal Cunningham, the Democrat, can catch up and defeat him.
Oh, very interesting. This is just like 2 years ago, where it took us a week and a half to figure out that we'd had progressive and Democratic victories all over the country. And, because the mail-in votes were coming in slow. I mean, we're running on an antiquated electoral system that, particularly during the pandemic, relies heavily on the U.S. mail, which we've seen now can be corrupted. And, we need to come into the 21st century. Karen, thank you. Thank you for the call. Jeremy in Fairfax, Virginia. Hey, Jeremy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I was wondering if you saw the recent Axios article this morning about how Mitch McConnell's already planning to, if he retains the majority, to blocking Biden cabinet appointments right from the get-go, and unless they're more.
Yeah, I talked about that earlier. I think Biden needs to take a page from Trump and put acting people into his cabinet rather than worrying about what Mitch McConnell has to say.
Yeah, I agree with that, because you can't let Mitch McConnell hinder you right off the bat. And it's looking increasingly likely that we're going to have 2 runoffs in Georgia. And I don't know how you feel about this, Tom, but I have more faith in the African Americans in Atlanta to show out than clearly the people in Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom. Hi, good afternoon. I'm getting some feedback. I don't know if it's my phone or your phone. You think?
I don't know, Bill. Sounds fine on this end.
The thing I called about was this. Was it all the conversation about money or outside money coming in? Is the amount of money that came in from the left that went in on Republican campaigns?
I don't understand what you mean. Bill hung up. I don't understand the question. So, Tacky, or is it Taki in Malden, Massachusetts?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, it's Tacky from Malden, Massachusetts. I was just gonna ask you. So I've been watching the whole results coming in for the last 2 days. I've been eating for 2 days. So I was just gonna ask you whether you think Democrats are kind of way too optimistic about Arizona and Pennsylvania. Is it possible that if this thing goes down to the worst case scenario, with like the way I see Trump is, catching up with Biden pretty quickly in Arizona, and Pennsylvania? Well, we've been listening to this, Nate Silvers and this old mainstream media that Biden has a good chance. While saying there are only 700,000 votes to come in, I mean, it's doable, but it's not quite aligned with his optimism here with the thing, and then now I see it was already called Arizona. So I just want to know, what do you think about that?
Well, we are confronted with one of two possibilities. Either the polls were right or the election results are right. There's about a 10-point spread between what the polls were telling us was happening and what the election results are telling us is happening. And we need an answer to that question, number one. Number two, if what you're asking is, please reassure me that Joe Biden's going to be president, I think that that's pretty likely. In fact, I think it's virtually a certainty, but I'm not counting anything out. I mean, the New York Times this morning was saying there's 27 different paths for Biden to become president. There's only 4 for Trump to become president. But as long as there's 4 paths for him to become president, we just have to hold our breath. Tacky, thanks for the call. Whew. Boy, what a day. We're going to be back with Greg Palast and Dr. Justin Frank right after this break. And folks watching us on YouTube or Free Speech TV, you may see the screen go black for a little bit as we reset our systems, because we've got to get our sync back. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Tom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Tom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom.
The Thom Hartmann Book Club, Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson, who was a guest on our program a while back. This is from page 86. One of the great privileges of whiteness is not to see color, not to see race, and not to pay a price for ignoring it, except, of course, when you're called on it. But even then, the price pales quite literally in comparison to the high price black folk pay for being black. We pay a price too for not even being able to derive recognition and financial reward for the styles that make the world want to be black so bad that they don't mind looking like us as long as they never ever have to be us. If the appropriators can freely rip off our culture with no consequences, those who revise racial history, the 4th stage of white racial grief, are even less accountable for their deeds. The way of the racial revisionist when it comes to black life and history is simply to rewrite it. Their motto is, it didn't happen that way. There's a flood of writing that tells us that the Civil War wasn't really about slavery, but about an effort to defend states' rights. But, my friend, you've got to put yourself in our place and see the absurdity of such a claim. Defend the rights of states to do what? To enslave blacks. But even here, the irresistible logic of whiteness, that is, irresistible to whites themselves, and to all of us who are subjected to white whim, springs into full action. White American history is so powerful that even when it loses, it wins, at least in skirmishes within whiteness itself. From the right wing, there is the belief that the Civil War was fought over the ability of individual states to beat back a federal government out to impose its will. From the left wing, there's the belief that the Civil War was a conflict between the planter class and the proletariat. In each case, race as the main reason for the war is skillfully rewritten, or really written out. Slavery is rewritten too. Some white Christian apologists contend that black folk needed slavery to save their souls or to rescue their cultures. A contemporary twist on this argument radiates in thinkers like Dinesh D'Souza, who claims that American blacks brought here through slavery are now doing far better than their African kin. Some white critics argue that since blacks sold other blacks into slavery, bondage was a black man's problem, not a white man's burden. But revisionists would much rather describe the dehumanization of black folk as little more than a commercial transaction. It's another way of washing their hands of racial responsibility. The effort to rewrite history surfaces in how Malcolm X is treated in the mainstream. It hardly seems likely that the culture he fought with all his heart could be depended on to grasp his true meaning. Malcolm is often read as an apostle of violence, as a frightful figure consumed by destructive rage. But the truth is far more complex, and Malcolm was far more complicated. But isn't the autobiography of Malcolm X so enduringly appealing because it shows Malcolm giving up hatred as a means to racial justice? Now, Malcolm X believed in the liberation of black folk from the mental and psychological chains of white supremacy. He was not committed to nonviolence as a way of life or as a method of social. Will. From the left wing, there's the belief that the Civil War was a conflict between the planter class and the proletariat. In each case, race as the main reason for the war is skillfully rewritten, or really written out. Slavery is rewritten too. Some white Christian apologists contend that black folk needed slavery to save their souls or to rescue their cultures. A contemporary twist on this argument radiates in thinkers like Dinesh D'Souza, who claims that American blacks brought here through slavery are now doing far better than their African kin. Some white critics argue that since blacks sold other blacks into slavery, bondage was a black man's problem, not a white man's burden. But revisionists would much rather describe the dehumanization of black folk as little more than a commercial transaction. It's another way of washing their hands of racial responsibility. The effort to rewrite history surfaces in how Malcolm X is treated in the mainstream. It hardly seems likely that the culture he fought with all his heart could be depended on to grasp his true meaning. Malcolm is often read as an apostle of violence, as a frightful figure consumed by destructive rage. But the truth is far more complex, and Malcolm was far more complicated. But isn't the autobiography of Malcolm X so enduringly appealing because it shows Malcolm giving up hatred as a means to racial justice? Now, Malcolm X believed in the liberation of black folk from the mental and psychological chains of white supremacy. He was not committed to nonviolence as a way of life or as a method of social strategy. He believed that such a commitment prevents the full realization of black emancipation. Yet he was not personally violent. As Ossie Davis says in his eulogy, responding to the claim that Malcolm preached hate and was a fanatic and a racist, quote, "Did you even talk to Brother Malcolm? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance?" End quote. The rage that flowed in Malcolm's veins was the rage against a force of whiteness that aimed to wash its black kin from the face of the earth. The urge to rewrite black history occasionally gives way to the final stage of white racial grief, which is simply, when it comes to race, dilute it. That is, to argue that black stuff doesn't just plague black folk. To summarize, bad stuff happens to everyone. This argument surfaced in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
Welcome back.
And
Tom
that
Hartmann
storm
here with
certainly
you.
hit
A
black
lot of
folk,
people
but it hit
around the
white
country
folk,
are
too.
asking the question,
This
how
is
did
the
this election
sordid
get so
version
close?
of
I
reverse
thought the
American
polls showed
exceptionalism.
that
It is the
Democrats
same
were
Me
way
Too
ahead of Republicans
impulse
all across the
that
country,
flares in the
and
bitter
that Joe
battle
Biden was
against
walking
affirmative
away
action.
with it, beating
Beloved,
Donald Trump
I
by
can't
10
help but
points.
notice that affirmative-
What the hell happened? It was showing this in Georgia. It was showing this in Nevada. It was showing this all over the country. What's going on? Greg Palast is on the line with us, investigative journalist, author of How Trump Stole 2020, gregpalast.com, Palast.com, of course, his website, and his Twitter handle, like mine's got an underscore in it, Greg_Palast. Greg, welcome back. Tell us, why is it that in these states where the polls show Democrats winning overwhelmingly, the actual vote count is showing a damn tight race?
Well, because the Democrats did win overwhelmingly if you count all the votes and let all the voters vote. So, for example, in Georgia, just looking at the numbers, there are Trump's ahead by 14,000 votes, but 50,000 votes have yet to be counted in Atlanta. So, he should be pulling away with it in the end if they don't challenge those votes. Remember, what's left are mail-in ballots, and about 1 in 5 get challenged. Now, whether those challenges will succeed, I don't know. But here's the thing. Stop rending your cloth. Stop crying, pollsters. You got it right. It was a blue wave. They just didn't let everyone vote who should. For example, we had my report for the ACLU said 198,351 voters, nearly 200 grand of voter rolls illegally. That made the difference. The purges were massive. The only reason why Michigan and Wisconsin, and in Georgia, 198,000 illegally removed. We've talked, famously about Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin among them, and I said wrongly removed. We checked, and this could cost the Senate because Ossoff, John Ossoff, should be walking away in Georgia, and it's a nail biter. I think he's going to fall short. They're going to make sure he falls short. In North Carolina, we had massive purges of the voter rolls in North Carolina, 313,000 taken out in Michigan. That's why that was a squeaker. Why should it be a squeaker? You've got Motown there. You've got the UAW. It shouldn't be a squeaker. So it's about blocking voters from voting is number one, and not counting ballots. Tom, when I'm with BBC, and we report an election in Britain, you say 500 votes for the Tories, 700 for Labour, and 26 ballots were not counted for the following reasons. We don't have any of that discussion of the ballots not counted and the people blocked from voting. 4 years ago we had 925,000 provisional ballots thrown in the garbage. I didn't remember a single report from the media, and when they're doing the polling, they don't account for those votes that are not counted. The pollsters ask if the exit pollsters, did you vote? They can't ask you, did your vote count? They don't know.
Right. So in Georgia, for example, somebody goes to vote. They're told, sorry, you're not on the voter rolls, but the 2002 Help America Vote Act requires me to give you a ballot. So here is a provisional ballot. The person votes the provisional ballot, hands it back in, thinks that they voted. They walk out, talk to the exit pollster, tell them that they voted. What happens to that provisional ballot?
Well, the chance about 40% that it's going to be thrown in the garbage. And if you're not on the voter rolls, like Mrs. Christine Jordan, I did suggest she go back in and at least fill out a provisional ballot, but it was not counted. This is the problem. You have these political hacks, like in Georgia, Brad Raffin's Purger. That's really his name, Mr. Purger. And, they are violently, ethnically cleansing the voter rolls. And by the way, the only reason why Biden has Wisconsin, and the only reason he may end up being president, is because of Mandela Barnes, the Democratic lieutenant governor, who raised hell about massive illegal purges that were about to happen in Wisconsin. The legislature required the state to remove 129,000 voters. My team, Mandela Barnes, brought us in. My team went through the list. We found it was a phony list. The state said, we are not going to purge these voters. They'd already come to. So they literally said, we're not going to follow this. They stalled the GOP. Those voters got to vote. And again, in Wisconsin, I just wanted to mention this. These are not illegal voters, despite what Agent Orange, your commander-in-chief, says. These are voters simply attempting to vote while black. Again, I brought up Sequana Taylor, the this supervisor in Milwaukee County was going to be removed because she supposedly left Milwaukee. She's the county supervisor, but again, voting while black. Because of the resistance by the Democratic and leadership, and particularly the African-American activist Mandela Barnes, it's not a minor part of this discussion. Black folk were really fighting over these issues. Wisconsin was saved for Biden. It's not a matter whether you're for or against Biden. It's a matter of the voters in Wisconsin actually got to choose this time, unlike 4 years ago. So Biden's going to squeak that one through. But I'm very concerned about the purges. And then finally, I'm also concerned about the non-count of mail-in votes. We're not being told how many votes have been rejected. And we need to find that out. 1.9 million votes that had instinct in 2016 were rejected. And I'm very concerned about the mail-in ballots. And that's what Trump is going to court to do, to try to stop the count of the ballots. I said he said he wanted to stop the voting. I know that was his dream, but he may still try to stop the count. Same thing.
Yeah. I heard there was one commentator on TV last night who kept saying stop the vote, or that they're trying to count stop the vote, and I was like, stop the count. That's what's really going on. It's the count. It's not the vote. So, Greg, has the Democratic Party figured this out?
Well, I can tell you, I've spoken to John Ossoff. He gets it right away. I know Kamala Harris has told a member of our team that it keeps her up at night. But you've got an African American. That's an African American official. Let's not forget what may be our first female vice president. So it does keep her up at night. But how many white politicians are kept up at night, I can't tell you. And whether they're ready to Wisconsin, I think the fact that you had Mandela Barnes made a difference. But in Michigan, it got close because the Democrats just didn't reverse the policies of the Republicans. They didn't purge more voters, but they did not act and think about putting back 313,000 Michigan voters who had been purged from the vote rolls by the GOP under just the most cockamamie excuses to get rid of voters of color. It was ugly, but it has not been reversed. So are they awake? I talked to the head of the National Bar Association, which is basically your African-American Bar Association, and she says, we still have tons of education to do with the politicians, including the Democrats, on protecting these votes.
Now, when the votes are being counted, when mail-in ballots are being counted, the first step is to look at the outside of the envelope at the signature and compare it with the signature in the voter registration book, just like they do when you show up in person. That's a biometric way of, it's very, very difficult to fake a signature. And a lot of these get rejected. Are the people who are overseeing this, is there like a Democrat and a Republican, and they can challenge it, and the Republican might say, oh, that's from Atlanta, I'm going to challenge that. Or the Democrat might say, hey, that's from rural, Georgia, I'm going to challenge that. Or is it a nonpartisan process entirely?
Well, we have 52 voting jurisdictions in America with 52 different rules. And they're all different. And one of the problems is, so let me give you a stat that's pretty ugly. In 2016, we had 141,000 mail-in ballots rejected over someone's challenging a signature. Now, we don't have 141,000 forgery experts in America, so why are they rejecting these ballots? And overwhelmingly, it's 300% more likely you lose your ballot if you're black or Hispanic than if you're white. That's the problem. Right. The challenges are going against Democrats of color.
Yeah, I got it. Greg Palast, gregpalast.com, his latest book, How Trump Stole 2020. Thank you, Greg.
You're the best, Tom. Thanks.
Back at you. We'll be right back here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Right after this, the place where despair is not an option. Welcome back. Ronnie in New Berlin, Wisconsin. Hey, Ronnie, what's up?
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. I got to tip my hat to you. How you end your show, get active, be the change and all of that. I did get active this year. I've never given to a campaign, and I donated multiple campaigns. I wrote postcards to swing states. I talked about the difference between Biden and Trump to a lot of people, and I ended up working at a poll station helping people vote. And it was
wow, Ronnie.
very.
I tip my hat to you.
It was very satisfying. I was a little afraid I bit on more than I can chew because I worked from 6 a.m. until close, but just the adrenaline that I had, the day just flew by. And I was working in a very Republican area, and I knew that, that area was going to go for Trump, and it did. But at the end of the night, we had to go through all the ballots and look for write-ins. And so, write-ins just for the presidency. So, you're looking. Well, as you're looking to see if there's a write-in, you can also see if it's Trump or Biden. And I was overwhelmed by how many Biden votes that there actually were in this very red area. So little by little, we are making inroads in that city and county. But what I wanted to talk about was voter ID. And I know how we all feel about this on the left, but I got to tell you, without voter ID, it would be so hard to understand what a lot of people say because they don't want to say their name and address out loud. Some people have accents. Some people, I'm a mailman, and I have seen every last name imaginable. I saw so many last names Tuesday that I had never seen before. So having that ID pressed up against the plexiglass, it just made it so much easier to figure out what people were saying and their address too. So I understand the problems with it, but boy, oh boy, it really was helpful on Election Day.
Sure. Well, that's the difference between requiring it and, hey, can you show me your ID so I can figure out how do you spell your name?
Exactly. Yeah.
I got it. But did you sense or did you see any partisanship among the fellow poll workers, or are people pretty rigorous about not revealing their political opinions?
No, it was, you could not tell who was who. Everyone got along. No one was saying anything partisan. No one was, leaning one way or another. Anytime that there was a first-time voter, we cheered as they put their ballot in the reader. And it was just a lot of good camaraderie. We were all there to do the right thing. And any of these Trump supporters and Trump himself, who's like, any kind of chicanery that goes on at the polls and cheating at the polls, there is so much double checking. You're working two people, there's two supervisors, there's multiple people around. There is no cheating going on at the polls.
Yeah, good. Ronnie, thank you. Thanks for the reassurance. And again, a tip of the hat to you for everything that you're doing. Ronnie, thank you so much. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be shortly here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Did you know that there have been 8 federal judges who have been convicted and removed from the federal bench? 15 altogether have been impeached. 8 have been removed from office since, since the beginning. 3 of them since 1988, including one judge, Thomas Porteous down in Louisiana, who was impeached and removed from office for signing false financial declarations under penalty of perjury, which it turns out it looks like Clarence Thomas did for quite a number of years when he did not disclose, as he is required by law to do, that his wife was taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Heritage Foundation. That and his perjury around Anita Hill and others, there were numerous witnesses that didn't even get called, could legitimately spark an impeachment of Clarence Thomas. We got a video about this over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program. Check it out. welcome back. 21 minutes past the hour. And Alan in Vancouver, Canada. Hey, Alan, what's up?
Yes, I've been a listener for about 17 years. I just wanted to pass this on to you. For the last 100 years, no Republican had been elected on November the 3rd. But FDR, LBJ, Carter, Clinton, and now Biden all elected on November the 3rd.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. This is because Election Day, moves around depending on which Tuesday is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. I think it is. But yeah, that's amazing, Alan. What a great bit of trivia. Thank you for sharing that, and great to hear from you. Thank you for listening. Oh, I'm sorry, Alan. You'll have to call back again. I didn't realize you were going to say anything more. I thought that was it, and I've got a slight delay here, so I push the button, and then a half a second later, I see the results. Joe in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I got a two-part question. One is I was listening to this other broadcasting, and is Trump letting Nevada vote?
Trump can't stop Nevada from voting.
Okay, because I heard.
Yeah, what Trump is trying to do, he's trying to go into federal and state courts as well and stop the vote count in any state where he's ahead so far, and the mail-in ballots are coming in showing that he's losing. And that would be in Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin. Now they're contesting. I mean, he's throwing legal stuff at everything he can in a desperate attempt to stay in the White House so he doesn't go to prison, and loses. Gambled the whole thing, and he won for 4 years, and now I think he's losing. Did I answer your question, Joe?
No, my second part is, I switched channels back and forth, and I heard one guy from Nevada. It must have been an official or something, that they're going to wait until Saturday and Sunday if they have to. So are they stuffing the ballots or what?
No, they're not. What's happened is that the mail is coming in slowly because Louis DeJoy disabled over 600 high-speed sorting machines that can sort 40,000 pieces of mail a minute, and now that's all having to be done by hand. And so you've got on-time delivery around 50, 60% in some places. And so the mail is coming in slow, number one. And number two, there are several states, and I believe Nevada is one of them, where your mail-in ballot does not have to be received on the election day. It has to be postmarked by election day. So if you delivered your mail-in ballot to the post office by day before yesterday, by Tuesday, then it may take 2, 3, 4, 5 days to arrive because DeJoy has so screwed the post office. But they're giving them a couple of days. In Pennsylvania, they extended it out 3 days. They'll count. I don't know what the number is specifically in Nevada, but it's several days. There are some states where it's as much as 10 days. I believe Nevada might be a 10-day state. There are other states where it's 3 days or 5 days because it varies from state to state. But these are people who all voted on or before Election Day. It's just that their votes are being counted. So, that's what's going on, Joe. Thanks a lot for the call. Ray in Crestwood, Illinois. Hey, Ray, what's up?
Hi, how you doing, Mr. Hartman? I just wanted to just say one thing. I'm sorry for cutting you off, but just real quick, because the lady told me to be quick. I think we need to do more than anything, short of turning to God Almighty Himself, is to follow the law. Let them. He gonna dig a hole for himself. The president will. If he's not right, it's gonna show up. I'm just thinking we should follow the law. I want to get your take on that. And if we follow the law,
which
that
law?
We have, the Constitution has been laid down. How do we proceed in elections? There's got to be.
Well, that's the problem. The Constitution basically doesn't say anything about elections other than that it's up to the states. And so because it's up to the states, you have some states, typically states controlled by Democrats, who are doing everything they can to make it easier for people to vote and convenient for people to vote because they believe in democracy and they want a lot of people to vote. You've got other states, mostly controlled by Republicans, that go out of their way to purge their voter rolls and make it really, really hard to vote and have you jump through lots and lots of hoops to be eligible to vote or to vote on voting day, and will challenge your vote when your vote comes in. So, that's the fundamental difference, Ray. And it's all, I think we need national standards for voting, frankly. We've got one small national standard for voting. That was the Motor Voter Act back in 1993. The Republicans fought it tooth and nail. But basically what it does is when you get your driver's license, if you can prove your citizenship at the time of your driver's license, you're automatically enrolled to vote. And states, again, that was optional for states, but they passed it legally all across the country. But we need rigorous federal standards. Ray, thanks a lot for the call. Thanks for listening to WCPT. We're hitting the bottom of the hour here, coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. It's Talk Media for the rest of us, the Thom Hartmann Program. Sticky day rolls on.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And the election is still fairly static. People in these states, the vote counters, are crossing their T's and dotting their I's and making sure everything will withstand a recount.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that. Though, because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone and of his own accord would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We could parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class. Black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
Daily rants and weekly op-eds at HartmannReport.com. It's free and there's no ads. HartmannReport.com. So we have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for people who are supporters of our program. And it gets into the 2016 election and what lessons we can draw from that for the 2020 election. For example, in 2016, according to the exit polls, and all we have to look at right now are pre-polls, but the exit polls, these are the actual voters who are being asked. In 2016, in Florida, Hillary Clinton, according to the exit polls, beat Donald Trump 47.7 to 46.4. According to the exit polls in 2016 in North Carolina, Hillary Clinton beat Trump 48.6 to 46.5%. In Pennsylvania, according to the exit polls, Hillary Clinton beat Trump 50.5% to Trump's 46.1%. And in Wisconsin, she beat Trump 48.2% to 44.3%. And yet all four of those states gave their electoral votes the official win to Donald Trump. Why is that? I lay it all out. You can check it out over at ThomHartmann.com. Here with you and on the line with us is Dr. Justin Frank, the psychoanalyst and clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at George Washington University, and the author of Trump on the Couch, along with Obama on the Couch and Bush on the Couch. His Twitter handle is Justin Frank MD. And Dr. Frank, welcome back. We were talking yesterday offline here about Donald Trump and his lawsuits. What does I mean, he's had thousands of lawsuits as a business person. Now he's suing to stop vote counts all around the world, or all around the country, excuse me. What does this tell us about him?
Well, it tells us, first of all, that he has what's called arrested development. He psychologically has not been able to develop into having a complex way of thinking. So he uses particular ways of resolving problems, which involve attacking reality, attacking other people, using his money to bully people, and it's a basic defense that ultimately cannot mature. So most of us, we develop more sophisticated defenses and ways of coping with anxiety as we get older. We use humor, we use various ways of coping. But he has not. He essentially attacks reality because he has an unconscious that's very deep hatred of reality. And that's actually a kind of a psychotic part of a personality. What we've seen with him during his presidency and before, all these lawsuits are what is the constant thread. The circumstances, the subject of the lawsuits are always different. They're whatever is going on at the time. But the process of the lawsuits have to do with his basic, fundamental, pathological coping mechanism. His Trump remains the same. It's an omnipotent defense. It's a defense of feeling you are not right. I'm going to get what I want. This is what I need. This is what I have to have. And he has always been this way since he was a child. And you can see it all the way through his development or his growth. He's grown without developing psychologically at all. So his world is very constricted into good and bad, black and white, and these defenses are very primitive. So the basic thing that's behind the lawsuit is an attempt to attack and destroy reality and to deny it and to deny its existence. It's also a way of evading any responsibility, which we've seen in him, always blaming other people and always evading responsibility. But the other part is that it reflects at another unconscious level in my experience in getting to know him through this book, he has a deep need to be rescued by somebody. And in this case, and he denies it to himself. So he goes on attack, but unconsciously, he's always being rescued by lawyers. So on the one hand, he appears to be attacking, but he's actually having other people save him and rescue him. And at the deepest level, that was originally his father. Roy Cohn helped him codify that way of acting so he could really attack and look like he was an attack dog when actually all along they were holding his hand and they were rescuing him.
That's interesting that you got to his father, because that was going to be my question. Is his father, on the one hand, was not a nurturing father. I mean, that's fairly well established, and Mary Trump talks about this in her book. And when Donald got, his ADHD or whatever it was got bad, they just sent him off to a pretend military academy, to a school that where they pretended to be in the military and they wore uniforms. But on the other hand, when his casino in New Jersey was failing, his father walked in with $1 million in cash, bought chips, in other words, handed the money over to the casino, and then walked out with the chips, which was probably $30 worth of chips. And so his father has rescued him, and it turns out, his big thing during the campaign was my dad gave me $1 million loan, which I had to pay back. We discovered when the New York Times did a deep dive on the whole, estate and how it shook out, that Trump had actually walked off with almost $450 million of his daddy's money. And this was back in the 80s, when that amount of money would probably be worth $700 or $800 million, maybe $1 billion today. So his dad really was rescuing him repeatedly. Is he seeing the courts as essentially a father figure or a power figure that can save him?
Well, he's seeing not the courts are not going to rescue him, but his lawyers are going to rescue him. His lawyers are like his dad. His dad came to his rescue and gave him money. Now his lawyers come to his rescue and give him power and force, and they help him defeat whoever the bad guys are for him. But basically, you're right. The lawyers unconsciously are like his father, who he has never gotten over this need to be rescued. And it's very deep. You're right on the money there. And that's what he did. He was rescued around the casinos. He was always saved by his father. And yet at the same time, he was also sent away by his father. The reason he was sent away to military school, though, and was because his behavior was out of control, because his father, who was actually very smart and very tyrannical, both, said to himself, I cannot cope with my son. He is too much for me. His behavior is out of control. He is dangerous to his siblings. He is dangerous at school, and he has to go to some form of a military academy where they set limits for him. And that there, even though it was a sort of a pseudo-military academy, one of the things they did was he became very neat. He made his bed. They insisted on organization and structure, and he did those things. So he learned how to temper his rage and focus a little bit more. But the impulsiveness has remained, and his need to destroy and attack is constant. And his father could never control that. And so his father ended up... Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
Finish your thought, and then I'll ask my question.
No, his father never could control it, so he tried to temper it. Donald actually learned to try to do certain things behind his father's back still, even as an adult. But whenever he was caught, he just gave in. His father was very controlling, very powerful, and yet at the same time was his lifeline to any kind of success.
So if Donald Trump is saved by his father over and over and over again through his early life, and
yes,
we see in the election of 2016, if the allegations of our federal Justice Department, of the FBI and the Justice Department are correct, Vladimir Putin saved him in that election, or made him president. That's right. Thus, he goes to Helsinki and spends 2 hours holding hands in private with Putin, and then comes out and says, Putin's wonderful, our intelligence agencies are full of crap. So how does this, so it seems like that's kind of an extension, and Putin's become his father's surrogate, but now it looks like Putin has kind of cut him loose, maybe not, I don't know, maybe he's just pretending to, and is he turning to other people? I mean, Jared Kushner had to go to the Middle East to get his $1 billion to save his butt, and, it looks like Donald was involved in that. What's the dynamic? I mean, if that father save me dynamic was playing out large in the 2016 election, how is that playing out in this election? We just have a minute till we hit a hard break, Dr. Frank.
It's really it's complicated, but it's the same dynamic. The dynamic is that's why he had to have extensive rallies. The rallies become like saving people. Those people who he seduces and charms with his comments and his anger, unconsciously, they are saving him and they're protecting him. They're not doing it financially, but they will do it through voting, and they will make him feel stronger and more like a man. He has to do that, or else he's lost. So now that he can't do the rallies and he's losing the presidency, he's sitting and tweeting, but he's also pretty much in his room watching the news. This is a person who needs to be saved. And he came across as a savior when he was trying to save the people who were abandoned by the coastal elites. But he was also unconsciously saving himself and getting them to save him.
Remarkable. Dr. Justin Frank, his book, Trump on the Couch, it's brilliant. Justin Frank, MD, his Twitter handle. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll
You're
be right back.
listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio archives.
We will continue with your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Jennifer in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hey there. Can you hear me?
I can.
Cool. All right. So I have found a canvassing, curing ballots site. So you would text bank and phone call to cure ballots in states like Georgia and North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. I'm listening.
I think that's possibly an important aspect of this election, since it's
What does
close
curing
call.
ballots mean?
So from what I understand, I have yet to take the training myself, but from what I understand, it is anyone that has had a rejected ballot for any reason. And I'm assuming it's probably just calling and texting those people who have been notified to try and, push them to take care of that. At this point, I wonder if people are kind of, thinking, it doesn't matter or whatever. But, if we can get a few thousand more ballots cured in that way, I think it might be helpful.
So there is a campaign where you can help folks cure their ballots? Is that the deal?
There is. There's several ways to do it. I mean, I found out, I think I saw a Twitter link, but you can also Google through mobilize.us. And there's several campaigns that come up for that, but I think North Carolina and Georgia are kind of the hot spots for that kind of thing. And I have I know you don't like to promote websites you haven't checked out, but I do have a link to a specific one that will let you text bank.
I'll trust you.
Yeah. So it's organizing.nextgen, America.org.
Oh, that's Tom Steyer's group. Yeah, they're solid.
Okay.
Next Gen America
cool,
is, in fact, he was on our show yesterday.
Nice.
That's the group that Tom Steyer started. Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
So you can text bank,
Jennifer,
you can phone
thank
bank. Yeah. Awesome. Hopefully
thank you very much. Good talking with you. Yep, you did help out. Chris in Lakewood, Washington. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate all your work. People like you make me want to keep going and believe in humanity. In any event, I was wondering what you thought of terror management theory, as an explanation why so many white Americans vote against their own interests. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It was based on Ernest Becker's, I think, Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Denial of Death. In other words, that people have a subconscious, at least a subconscious awareness that they will not live forever. And one way to transcend that is by identifying with something greater than they that will probably continue. And in this case, I guess it would mean, the United States, the idea of exceptionalism, the idea of white supremacy, the cultural idea that our values are, if you will, better than others. And therefore, with this subconscious awareness that and death and denial of death is a priority, that would take precedent over perhaps logical thought.
That's a very real possibility, Chris. That's the sort of thing Justin Frank would be the expert on, but that's a very, very real possibility. That's fascinating. Ernest Hemingway once said, "Artists are the only true immortals because the work that they create lives on beyond them." But Frank Lloyd Wright is said to have said something like that too about architects. Chris, thanks a lot for the call. The Hidden History of Monopoly tells how Robert Bork, that guy from the Reagan era, transformed corporate America and destroyed the American dream. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the folks who support our program, and it's about exactly why rich people, I'm talking about people who make more than $1 million a year marginally, and over $3 million a year, that group totally, why this group of people who are multi-millionaires and are literally bringing into the house over $1 million a year and over $3 million a year, why would they want to destroy Obamacare? Turns out there's a very simple answer, and a very straightforward answer, and a rather shocking answer, that they would put all this time and effort, years of work, into trying to kill Obamacare and throw 20, 30, 40,000 people, million people, off their health care. And you can see it, hear it, read all about it, as it were, over at thomhartmann.com in our new members-only video. Oh, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Heidi in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Hey, Heidi, what's up?
Hi, Hi there. Yeah, so I was just listening about the curing ballots, and I was doing that for Florida. But if you go to democracydocket.com, you'll see the list of places. And essentially, what's happened is that most often ballots get rejected now for the signature mismatch, right? So just another extra thing they're doing to us. And so if your signature doesn't match, say maybe your driver's license signature that they have on file, they reject that ballot and doesn't get counted. And curing it means you reach out to that voter, because supervisors of elections, at least in Florida, don't notify you. And you would just need to sign an affidavit with a picture of your ID and send it in. But so people are calling those voters whose ballots were rejected that they don't even know they were rejected. So that's the approach.
Yeah.
But Democracy Docket is
democracydocket.com.
And so Democracy Docket, DOCKET, and
.com.
I had found
and then there's
out about
nextgenamerica.com, I think it is, or
Perfect.
.org, whatever it is, also.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Heidi.
No, I think that's great. Love everything you do, and if people can support that, that'll help Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. I think are the three opportunities.
That's great. Heidi, thank you so much for the call and for the confirmation of that. Blaine in Jacksonville. Hey, Blaine, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for all you do. So I was wondering your thoughts on the election in Bolivia 4 years ago and the one that also just happened recently, and thinking if maybe Mr. Trump might want to do the same move where they had the false reports that were only shown recently to be false, and so everyone believed it, and the far right had the military coup, and etc.
Right. In Bolivia, the far right had basically the billionaire class, or maybe it's multimillionaires down there, but the very wealthy, with a little help from their friends, like the United States apparently, was spreading disinformation. And a lot of that disinformation was actually being spread on Facebook, but it was also being done through talk radio in Bolivia, and it was also being done through newspapers. And you're right, it took them years to figure out that they'd all been lied to, and I think that's been the Republican strategy for 40 years. Ronald Reagan started lying to us in his initial inauguration. He said that, the cause of your problems is government. It's not the solution to your problems, it's the cause of your problems, which is just a lie, right up front. I mean, it might be a cause for the problems for people like Charles Koch, who don't want to have their pollution regulated, but it's not it's not for the average person. So, yeah, Blaine, I think you're onto something. And I'm sorry, say it again?
We need some social benefit, not socialism exactly, but thank you. And that's true. I just recently saw on Facebook a friend of mine share a false report that I'm sure was photoshopped. That was like, these many folks were supposed to vote, and these many folks did, which was suggesting fraud already. So.
Right. Yeah, no, lies are all over the place. Facebook has just become a cesspool. Blaine, thank you. Maya in Northville, Michigan. Am I saying your name right?
You are. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hey. Good. What's up?
Hey, so I have a theory, and I've had a thought since, this whole debacle started. How can Trump avoid losing officially? I think we all know he's lost throughout his entire life, but officially losing. And I think the way he does that is probably, if it's possible, to step down and just avoid prison, federal prison, and maybe let Pence take over so he can say, they stole the election, I'm not going to deal with this, I'm stepping down. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. We talked about this last week, that if Trump loses, what's he going to do? And my position, my guess is, and I put this at probably well over 50%, but I may be wrong. I don't know. I don't think Trump cares so much what history thinks of him. I think that we've been watching that for 4 years now, for 5 years in the primary as well. I think he cares more about whether he's going to make money and stay out of jail. He doesn't care about his reputation. He has no shame. He can't be shamed. So I don't think that he would be embarrassed by resigning a week before the inauguration so that he doesn't have to go to the inauguration ceremony and Mike Pence can pardon the entire Trump crime family. That's what I'm predicting.
Yeah, I think so too.
It might be more than a week in advance, but yeah. And then he'll just say, screw all of you, and he's going to head down to Mar-a-Lago and camp out in a state that voted for him. And yeah, or Russia. I mean, it's. I think he is a flight risk. I actually do. I think he is a flight risk. Maya, thanks a lot for the call. I got to run. It's the end of the show, but thank you. And apologies to all of you who are on hold. We'll catch up tomorrow. Tomorrow is Anything Goes Friday, so whatever you want to talk about, we'll carry on with it. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget democracy isn't a spectator sport. No, it's not. It requires you. That's why it's called democracy. So get out there, get active. There's great stuff you can do. And curing ballots, go over to Next Gen America and check out their curing ballots thing. That's fascinating. Great what they're doing. Tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. Be kind to somebody.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code Tom. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code Tom. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom.